Well, hello and welcome back to Artifact Live. The idiot behind the camera here, next to the camera, has still pressed the wrong buttons, Paul. I'm sorry.
It's no problem. It's just too many buttons to press, that's all.
I've never had this problem. This is the 70th show, but because I've been rushed off my feet, it just shows you these little edges.
Yeah.
They suddenly go. So all that is when I'm editing the intro, there's a music track, and if I mute it, it doesn't record, obviously.
Yeah.
And like an idiot, I just forgot again to unmute the.
Oh, yes, well, we've all been there.
Anyway, welcome back, folks. What did you think of last week, mate? It was quite good, wasn't it?
I thought it was brilliant. I'm slightly biased because I've
character.
known her for ages. So Jennifer's great. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. And lots of. Did you go and listen to the album she recommended?
Well, to be honest, I didn't because I wanted to do it properly, and I knew that I was not going to. I mean, it's an hour, and I want to spend it on my own in the house and listen to it properly. So I haven't. Have you listened to it?
I've listened to the title track. Yeah, fantastic. Right. She was right.
Okay, I'm intrigued by that, but I'm going to behave myself and not I want to do it properly, do it justice. But the other thing that happened, and I kind of suspected this would happen. We broadcast. I think it's only the second time I've ever broadcast this show into my music Facebook group.
Okay,
and there's been people all over the world have responded to it.
Great.
Which is really, I haven't let her know yet, actually. I need to let her know because, again, I've just been rushed.
Oh, that'll be a nice surprise. She'll love that.
She'll be chuffed about that. But there was one guy in particular who is a recording artist. He works I think he's in Japan.
Okay.
And he loved it. And he's been off looking at all her work. And
she's got a couple of clients out in Japan right now.
Has she?
So she's active in that part of the world.
Well, I think it was definitely a worthwhile show. And I think, like many of our guests, we need to have her back at some point because we didn't even scratch the surface, man.
Oh, I know she'll do it. She's just one of those people that says yes to life. So,
well, you can't go wrong with that, can you? Well,
nope.
So this week, well, I love this. Look, this title, Twigs and Old Socks.
There's got to be a story in there somewhere.
There's got to be a story in that. When Tina sent this to us yesterday, I was like, this whole show could be an artifact, it could be. But I think
the question is, are you a twig or a sock?
Well, that could be a new psychometric.
There you go.
It'd probably be more accurate than Myers-Briggs, right enough.
Steady on.
Hard.
You'll upset people,
Oh, yeah, and you know how much I care about that, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah, I know you are. So I think we should just get Tina on. What do you think?
I think that'd be lovely.
Tina, hi. Welcome to Artifact Live.
Thank you, Scott. Hello, Paul. Hello, world.
That's the standard that you're going to have to live up to, Tina.
I'll see what I can do.
And I have to say, I'm sorry about the music at the start. It's all meant to be professional, but the thing is, the edit means I can put the music back in, so no one will ever know, except us, and the fact that I've mentioned it on the live stream. Anyway, so yes. Should we give it full disclosure before we start here, folks? I think we probably should, eh?
I think we should, yes.
Paul?
So, Tina is my wife. My long-suffering wife.
Suffering wife, yes. What do you think of his taste in music, Tina?
I'll leave now.
I think probably better leave that one alone, I think.
I suspected that might be the case. You should meet my other half, Samantha, because she has the very same view of my taste in music, and Paul and I like a lot of the same music. So, yeah, it's.
I can cope with some of it, but some of it is just a little bit out of my comfort zone, I have to say.
Oh, you're much more generous than Samantha is with me. Oh dear. I took her to see Rush once, and she had about 5 hot dogs during the gig.
You love them then, yeah? The hot dogs.
She liked the hot dogs, and she said, I liked the drum solo. That was it.
Okay.
So, Tina, can I ask you to give the viewers and listeners a little rundown about what you do and where on earth this title came from? That would be terrific if you could do that for us, please.
Yeah, of course. Well, so I'm a bit of an eclectic girl, I have to say. So I write and I do proofreading and copy editing for my day job. But my passion, I think, probably is art and creativity and curiosity and experimentation and diving into interesting art materials that other people may never have considered. So, which is where we get to the Twigs and Old Socks.
So come on, tell us what that's all about.
Shall I reveal them to you?
I think you should reveal, yes.
Okay. So here is a twig.
Oh.
And an old sock.
Oh.
So basically I've got 2 sizes of twig and old sock. But then I also, this one is a bit of horsehair attached to a twig.
Right.
And I've also got sort of other twirly twigs with bits of twine and rope on the end of them. And and I've got one with feathers. Here we go. So these are all different kind of handmade brushes for mark making. So you basically just dip them in ink or paint and then use them to make marks on paper. As you do, of course, if you're an artist.
I've never heard it described as mark making before.
Have you not?
No, I haven't.
So
mark making.
So mark making is pretty much as it says. It is just making marks. Yes. And I kind of discovered mark making a few years ago now. I went to a little evening workshop, and it just opened up an entirely new world for me in art. Because one of the things we did was we didn't use these kinds of things on this particular course. We literally just used sponges and pens and dipped the sponge in ink, and you just made marks on a piece of paper. Right. But then, having made those marks, you then actually started to look into the piece of paper and find little areas that you really found appealing. Ah, right. Okay. So I don't know if you can see this. Yeah. Here's some I did earlier with let me move it. There you go. Yes. So these are literally just marks that I've made on a bit of paper with ink and using just these. Right. But then what I'll do is I'll kind of look at this and go, well, you know what? I really like maybe this area here. Right. So I might cut that out. Or I like the effect of some of these lines or whatever. Yes. So I may cut those out and then use those in a piece of artwork. Oh, I love it. So it's like creating, I guess, collage. Collage is probably the thing to so you create collage, and then I use here's some more I prepared earlier. So yesterday, because I'm very much into the idea of using natural materials. Yes. So eventually, I mean, I have been up until now working with acrylic paints and acrylic inks, and what I want to do is to move eventually completely over to plant and earth-based materials. Oh, right. Okay. And recycle things, hence the old socks. It's a great thing to do with your old socks when you've got a hole in the toe or a hole in the heel and you can't use them anymore. You can make a smudgy stick out of them. Yes. So yesterday I was playing with making some ink from the oriental poppies in the garden. Right. Now, amazingly, even though they're deep red, the ink comes out purple. So how cool is that? And then even more cool, if you put bicarbonate of soda in with it, it goes green. Right. Okay. I don't know how well you can see that. Yeah, I can see it. I can see it. So absolutely fascinating, really. All this play and experimentation. Oh well, Paul, you mind if I ask a couple of questions first if I start?
Jump in.
Is there a link between your work as a writer, a copywriter, all the other work you do, and this? Because you know what came into my mind there? Sort of Jack Kerouac, the sort of stream of consciousness type cut and paste. Is there a link? Or am I just am I seeing something that's not there? I could be, Tina.
Well, I think the link is that as part of my kind of creative process,
yes,
I do obviously write my own work as well as edit other people's.
Yes,
and that, I mean, there is a I guess there's a slight link at the moment, because I'm covering a maternity leave job at the moment, where I'm editing for the Agriculture and Horticulture Development Board.
Right.
So
that doesn't sound very exciting.
So I know more about yellow rust on wheat than probably anybody would actually want to.
Right.
And all sorts of things about forage and silage and so on.
Right.
However, there is definitely I guess a link between my interest and my connection to, you know, soil and land and nature, and gardening and flowers and so on. All of that is part of is part of who I am, but it's part of what I'm trying to find my way to express through my art. So I think I'd when I pinged you that email earlier, I'd said about there being a, you know, you can learn to paint, but learning to be an artist is something slightly different. So what I was getting at with that, and I'm going to use sunflowers and poppies as my examples, if you like. So I could go on a course and I could learn to paint like Van Gogh or Georgia O'Keeffe. I could learn that technique. I could learn how to mix colour in the way that they mixed colour. I could learn how to replicate what they did. But what I don't learn by doing that is what compelled them to paint those subjects in that way. Yes. And the bit that I think makes the artist is, what is it that is compelling you and what is it that you want to express? So taking Georgia O'Keeffe's Red Poppies, for example, an incredible painting of 2 red oriental poppies, the very oriental poppies that I have in my garden and that I made ink out of. What I think makes the difference between between me as an artist and Georgia O'Keeffe as an artist is, what is it that I have to say and what is it that I have to express? Yes. Because I have no desire to paint those red poppies in the way that Georgia O'Keeffe painted them. Right. I photograph them and I love them as structures, but I'm looking for something different. Yes. I'm looking to how do I express the feeling that I have with those poppies? How do I express the history of those poppies in my life? Because those particular poppies have been, they originated from the garden of an old gentleman that was a friend of my mum and dad's. Right. And I mean, he died when I was about 7, so it shows how old they were. And my dad took seed from those poppies and he grew them in his garden. And then he's given me, and my dad died in 2017 at the age of 90. Wow. And I have the descendants of those poppies in my garden. So there's a whole kind of story and history just to those poppies. And so what I'm trying to do as an artist is to capture something of that essence and bring that into my own expression, which will be entirely different to whatever Georgia O'Keeffe painted, but they will still be oriental poppies.
Do you know what, Tina, that was lovely. What you did there, and you probably know you're doing it, but you told a beautiful story about something that, and I'm sure Paul's experienced this as well as a musician, but there is that point where mimicry is not enough. You know, a lot of people start by, and it's the same in the work. I mean, a lot of our audience are business people. And it's the same there, Paul, isn't it? With the consultants with their red capes on, and we give them all these tools and techniques, but they can't implement it the same as I could, or you could, or anyone else could. It's down to them. And that essence story you told there about why you see it differently, or you should see it differently when you're becoming, well, the word becoming seems appropriate, becoming an artist rather than, someone who copies. I think that's really beautiful. Thank you, Tina. Honestly, I thought that was really lovely. And Paul, what do you think? Can you see parallels where I'm going here?
Yeah, I can. I think, and certainly building on Jennifer's thing, the thing the audience won't see, obviously, Tina and I have been together for a long time now, is the courage that goes into artistry is so underestimated, and the courage to step out and tell a story that is different, that people might not accept, that people go, oh, that's a bit weird, or you're a bit strange, or I mean, consider someone like Grayson Perry and his approach. Some people, it's a Marmite reaction. They either love him or they absolutely detest what he represents. And the thing I love about what Tina shared there is there are so many stories of that you don't see, even in the business world, where you're trying to make a decision to say, oh, do we play it safe? And, here's the standard proposal that's got, here's our team, the timeline, the benefits, all that kind of story. Or are you willing to sort of step out and go, no, we're going to write a different book, and we're going to write it now. And we're going to have the guts to do it. Otherwise, it just becomes, it distills and it tends towards mediocrity. And nothingness. And the thing I love about all art, but particularly what I'm seeing with Tina so close up, is how that journey sort of evolved from taking very first tentative steps into a workshop and going, could I, to almost a full-on approach, which is now, this is who I am, and this is what I do, and what I'm trying to do in the current context of our world, in the current, if you sort of move it into a metaphysical level, how do I show people a side of the world that perhaps they're not looking at right now because they're scrolling too much or they're watching the media too much. So I don't know what you think of that.
There was a couple of things. Yeah, no, I get that. I like the word, and Tina, I'd love you if you could build on this maybe, but there was a couple of things that are really closely linked to what Paul just said and what I wittered about. You talked about faith and trust in yourself, and then the phrase that jumped out when you sent a little email to me this morning, you said the language of the soul, not the ego. Can you build on that a little bit? Because it immediately jumped out at me, when you sent it. It was like, oh, I must confess, I was lying in the bath reading your email. and I went, oh, what's that? So can you maybe build on that a little bit and explain a bit more, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you see, I see leadership and being an artist actually being very much the same thing, actually, because as an artist, whatever stage you're at, if you are truly working with what's inside you, as opposed to, as you were saying earlier, sort of just learning the technique or mimicking other people's work. If you're coming from a place where you are working with what is truly inside you, it is a journey to get to the real essence of you, and to get to the real essence of your identity, and get to a point at which you not only have something to say, but you have the courage to actually say it.
Yes.
So if you like, what you put onto the canvas or paper or sculpture or whatever it is an outward expression of what is your inner self.
Right.
So it does require courage in order to do that. It's a lot easier to not stick your head above the parapet and put yourself and your work out there and say, hey, this is me.
Yes.
It requires intention and conviction and faith and trust in yourself to be able to do that, because the world is set up to point out the things that we don't do so well.
Yes.
To point out your weaknesses, your failures, your things that you need to improve on. And we spend very little attention, or put very little attention actually, on helping people to expand the stuff that they're really good at.
Yes.
And not trying to fill in the gaps, but actually allowing people to be who they truly are with the gifts and skills that they truly have.
Yes.
So I think when I talked about it being the language of the soul and not of the ego, it's that language that comes from the very depth of yourself, and not the who you think you should be, who you think you ought to be, who society is telling you to be, who what you think will get the most likes on social media, what you think is going to win you the most votes, what you think is going to fit in with what society considers norm, or even fit in with what you think is going to, get you to be successful on a grant application or a whatever.
Yes.
To truly go with that, with the language of your soul, takes a hell of a lot of courage. And I think that to be a leader requires that same level of courage, to be prepared to go out and start a new conversation.
Yes.
And build a new narrative. I mean, the conversation and narrative that I want to be part of going forward is the one that says that you can create great art, and you can create archival art. You can create art that will last forever, or that you can put in the compost bin. By by using materials that are not toxic to the planet. They might be toxic to humans, but that's a different matter. But they're not toxic to the planet.
Yes.
They're not adding yet more microplastics or plastic waste and so on. And that's a narrative and conversation I want to be part of. But it takes some courage to actually stand up and go, you know what, I'm not going to keep doing what other artists are doing. And I have no, I'm not saying that other artists are wrong to do that, but it would be just much easier to kind of go to Hobbycraft or any other art shop and buy some acrylic paint in plastic tubes and keep making art with that, because it's an awful lot easier than trying to make your own.
You remind me, and I've never spoken about this before. One of my greatest failures in my life was when I got a book deal with a very major Harry Potter related publisher, and I wrote 140,000 words. And none of them were in the right order, and none of them made any sense. It was terrible, right? I honestly wrote it like I was an academic, or I was writing like I thought I was an academic, or I thought it should have been written that way, or I'm just echoing back what you just said. I made such a mess of that, and it's taken me 10 years. And Paul's seen some of this stuff, and it sounds really wanky. There's a technical term for everybody. But my experience of that was I finally found out how Scott writes. And it took me 10 years of fucking up a book deal. And finally now when I read my own stuff, I think, that's me. Whereas
Yeah.
before I sounded like bloody Simon Sinek or one of these other pop psychologists or whatever, and it was dreadful. Is that the same thing, do you think? Or am I at the beginning still? Because it's
No,
something that, oh God, it's terrible.
and I think that's the thing, is it takes time. And
Yeah.
time is something we don't want to spend
Yeah.
these days. We want the hack. You know, we want to be able to write the book in 90 days.
Oh,
We want to be
nice.
able to go on a course and be Grayson Perry, you know,
Yeah.
or Van Gogh or whatever. We want to be able to, we don't want to take the time to discover our own voice and
Yeah.
who we really are. Largely because I think we've kind of started to be conditioned out of that. Everything has to be, you know, something you can bang up on Instagram in 30 seconds, you know, something you can do quickly, or, you know, convenience food. Even if you're making it yourself from scratch, it's still got to be done within 20 minutes.
Yes.
You know, everything is about speed these days. How quickly can I do this? And really discovering your own voice and who you are is not about speed. It's about taking the time to experiment and practice. That's why it's called practice. You know, a creative practice is called a creative practice because you practice, and practice is something you keep doing. It's not something you do once and then it's all over.
Yes.
So if you've discovered Scott, after 10 years of if you like fucking it up, then you know that is a marvelous thing, because you now have Scott. You now know who Scott is as a writer and what Scott has to say and what Scott wants to say.
Yes.
And so when's the next book coming out?
Well, I think that's a very good question. Funny, Paul and I were talking about this ages ago, but I'm kind of cheating, if I'm honest. I'm writing an essay every week.
So why is that cheating?
Well, so I need to. Well, I'm kind of building up the portfolio of essays. Probably, oh god, I'm getting interviewed now. It's like I do 2 different essays a week. I do one in the business world, one in the music world, and I put them out. And I get hammered. I used to get hammered. They would come back with lots of negativity, as you just said earlier. We're conditioned to that negative thing. I don't get that now. And the music one has taken off. I mean, I don't know if anyone's tuning in, but that's been really surprising that the music one has taken off the way it has. The business one, I still think people are, and I could be, I mean, some of my copywriter friends who I think are scary, and I don't get on with them because they're always thinking about how to sell stuff rather than about the story. Doesn't always have to be the same thing. You don't always have to be selling something. But the business one, I don't get as much criticism or positivity. It's like tumbleweed. And then 6 months later, someone says, I read one of your essays. It was really good, Scott. Well, why didn't you tell me? So maybe I still need that. Maybe that's still part of my conditioning.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that we get feedback when people are compelled or engaged sufficiently. I think we have to find something that will move people.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's in the business world or in the music world or in the arts world.
Yes.
Again, because we don't want to spend the time.
Yes.
We're constantly kind of looking for that kind of quick fix, quick read, quick hack or whatever. I think you have to find something that stops people in their tracks. And I know that's quite hard in the business world, I think. But hey, what a good thing to do. Why don't we do that? Why don't we start focusing more on how do we stop people in their tracks and make them stop and think about something, rather than how do we say the same thing that everybody else is saying, but in a slightly different way, because that's a bit more palatable.
And it's less offensive to, yeah. I find it funny that there's so much talk about disruption, and I think I mentioned this last week. Real disruption is quite offensive when it first comes through. Certainly with the surrealist exhibition that's on at the Tate at the moment, you look at some of that stuff, and there are parts of that you look at it and you say, "Wow!" But because you've seen a lobster sat on top of a phone, then it's kind of like, well, I've never seen the world that way.
Yes.
And I think, I don't know what it is, but people are so frightened of stepping out of line. The conversation earlier, both of you reminded me of a Warren Bennis quote, which is all about, becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. It's that simple and it's that difficult.
Very good, Paul. Do you know, Tina, you really have, in that very short, we've only been speaking for half an hour. While you were both talking there, I did the thing you're not supposed to do. My mind went away somewhere else. And I was thinking about the music I like, the artists I like. There's a common thread. And like, I don't know if you've come across the Cuban artist Enrique Celaya. He's extraordinary because his work is odd. But what I love about him, and I swear to you, I've got all his books in this room. It's his process that I love. The outcomes are not. I love the outcomes, but it's because I know of the work that he puts in and the effort and the number of times he stops and starts again and he rubs things out. And it's the very same in the musical world. Forget the rock music, but in the classical music that I like there's a guy called John Luther Adams who is he's based. He used to live in the North America in the sort of the snowscapes up there, and all his music is about nature and about the relationship. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's gorgeous. I mean, I've been very lucky to speak to him about it, and I don't know why I hadn't really connected the dots before, but it's all the bloody same. These are people who are thinking a lot and try to discover themselves and having the nerve, as you described it, Tina, to express it. And I'd never thought of that before. I don't know if that's how you feel about it, but that seems to have been a moment of understanding for me, certainly with some of the artists I enjoy.
I think also it's that two things. One is the being comfortable, getting comfortable with it and embracing the not knowing.
Yeah.
Because part of that experimentation is the not knowing what's coming next. So when I go back to my ink making, I had no idea what color ink was going to come out of these poppies.
Yes.
And I discover it's purple.
Purple.
And, hey, that's great.
Yeah.
But it's embracing that not knowing. And we're not very good at that, I think. Again, we've kind of become quite conditioned to wanting certainty, needing certainty, needing to know what the outcome is going to be before we've actually gone through the process of finding our way to that outcome.
Yes.
And I think we are very product and outcome driven, where actually life is a process.
Yeah.
And when we're so focused on getting to the outcome, we don't pay enough attention to the process, but we don't enjoy it.
Yes.
And the process the process is the most enjoyable thing. If you think of life as a journey, if you're not enjoying the journey, then, the end outcome is kind of going to come all too quick. And then you're going to look back on it and go, damn, I should have paid more attention to the process of life. And, and if you take that down to the process of becoming yourself, the process of becoming a leader, the process of becoming an artist, the process of becoming a musician, and what you learn along the way and the insight that you get along the way into yourself, but into the kind of wider insights into life.
Yes.
If we're too focused on getting to the outcome, we miss all that. And then I think we've missed the point of life itself.
Do you know,
a bit profound, wasn't it?
It was, but it was Sorry, I can only come from my own experience, but I one of the things that used to happen to me all the time in the consulting world, and again, I'm sure you've heard this from Paul, because we're all the same in the consulting world. Clients would come to me and say, "We'd like to engage you on this, multi-million-pound transformation project. Could you just write the plan first, please?" That's true, isn't it, Paul? I mean,
or could you tell us where you've done it before, and could you then sort of adapt that plan for us?
Exactly. And I used to do things like when I was a junior consultant, I would say, "Oh yes, of course." Yeah. And then you'd go off and you'd do this milestone plan with all the bells and all the whistles. And of course, within a bit working in a year in consulting, you realize none of this is going to work. And it's because they jumped straight. That word outcomes is such a big word in the business world, Tina. The number of books that are about focus on the outcomes, and it absolutely doesn't work. But they keep writing books, they keep making money, and people keep buying it. And
I think it's interesting because I read something the other week that said transformation is all about a change of heart, not a change of mind. Yeah. And until you change your heart, you're not gonna transform, because your mental models are stuck and they're fixed.
Oh, you're both being profound now.
Oh, sorry. Well, you can imagine what it's like in our household sometimes.
That's lovely. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, do you mind if we? I mean, how long? We're okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Could we go back a step?
Sure.
And help me, probably both of you here, about the why is there a gap between the sort of the artistic endeavor and the other, the sort of I don't know, the world of business or whatever you want to call it. I don't really care, but I feel there's a gap. We seem to be in our personal lives, or in how you described it beautifully, Tina, our inner lives, and what we really are. We're prepared to experiment. We're some of us are, not all of us, but we're prepared to experiment. We're prepared to try, do things differently. But the minute we get sucked in to the corporate world, and I don't really know what that means anymore either, but that dissipates. Because I mean, I've said in companies, I've said we should do experimentation, simple experimentation, where we'll try this technique in that department, this technique in that department, and that technique in that department, and we'll do nothing in that department, and we'll see which one works. And they all go, "Oh, can't do that. You need to give me the answer." Why is that? It just seems so anti-human not to experiment, not to be curious. And I'm getting wittery now, so I'm going to shut up. What do you think?
No, I think a lot of it is that it comes back down probably to the Industrial Revolution and our making of widgets, and where you have a production line, and education has kind of followed that. I mean, Ken Robinson did that. It was a fantastic talk about education killing creativity, and education becoming kind of like a sausage machine. You put kids in at one end, put them through this education process where you force information into them, and then chuck them out the other end. And there you'll have a nice compliant workforce who will go into whatever job you want and do as they're told. And I think that's partly what's kind of killed creativity, although I don't believe creativity has been killed off at all. But I do think it's kind of what has separated it. So work has become something that you do to go and earn a living. And unless you work in the creative industries, then work isn't creative. And creativity is something that you do, but you've got to be a bit odd to be creative, really, haven't you? I mean, you're not sort of typical if you're creative. You're a bit of a weirdo that nobody can quite understand. And we don't want too many weirdos in business, because too many weirdos, too many mavericks, too many people kind of questioning things and experimenting and so on. Well, it's creates too much disruption and change, and we don't like that. We want to kind of keep things, particularly for the bean counters, want to keep things kind of nice and neat.
Well, you don't get your economies of scale if you're not having a standardized process. You can't drive the long run average cost curve down,
Yes.
or your marginal costs down. So if business is all about profitability, then you can understand it.
But I mean, bringing both of those together, I mean, one of the things that I, in some of my keynotes, I talk about scalable efficiency. So that was why, I mean, I grew up in Lanarkshire in Scotland, and there's a place called New Lanark, which is one of the first places in the world where they did a cooperative. And the whole idea behind the cooperative, as you say, Tina, and that part of the early industrial revolution was to make business more efficient. And that, I totally agree with you. That is now, well, I think there's an argument to be put here, actually, that we're coming to the end of that. Eventually we scale it so far, there's no more efficiency. And we're getting to the point now where I'm now seeing like robots and things are taking out that we can't go any further. And maybe this is slightly speculative, guys, but maybe we're at the dawn of a new era of creativity, because we can't continue in society to just be focused on scalable efficiency, Paul, as you said, and Tina, you were the very same thing. But because companies have been squeezing this rag, for so long, there's no more water to come out of the rag.
Well,
but there's problems to solve, aren't there, that companies could address, and using the creativity that Tina's talking about in terms of just making a stand that says, I'm not going to use manufactured acrylic paints or paints that create a footprint on the planet that's harmful. And I know there's lots of people sort of intending to do that. There's lots of people say they're doing it. There are lots of people who are doing it, for sure. But there's loads of scope for that. And it's kind of interesting to watch how people choose to enter that, and whether or not they enter it by copying someone else or by taking a stand, and as Tina's done, and said, this is what I stand for. This is what I'm going to do. People, to quote Seth Godin, people like us do things like this.
Yes. What were you going to say, Tina?
Well, I was going to say sort of something fairly similar to Paul, but if we lose our ability to be creative, then we won't be able to solve the problems of, when you get to a point where there is no scalability. That is then a problem that needs to be solved. You need some creative thinking into how do you get beyond that.
And I think that's what I was trying to say clumsily.
If we're not... Well, by the way, what happened to business process reengineering? I remember that being a very big thing back in the sort of... Was it in the 90s?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's been rebranded. It's still around. It's like they use things like Agile and Six Sigma and Gamba Canrai and all the different names for it. It's all the same thing.
Right.
But I think again though, I guess the point, and I mean, it's a philosophical point. I still think we are rapidly getting to the point where there's no engineering to be done. And I think rather than saying creativity is important, I think creativity is essential for the continuation of the development of organizations. They're going to get to a point where it's like Star Trek, they're all going to have the same spaceship. But it's the people inside and their character and their creativity that's going to be the differentiator, not the processes. I think process is really, really important, as I've just said, but I think it's the human process that we've, and you're absolutely right about education. And, I think that has to be one of the main features of the next 20 years in business. It has to be. I can't see it. And I don't think that's a futurist speaking. I think that's just common sense.
Well, no, I agree. But I mean, who comes up with the processes?
Well,
it's not usually a process person. That comes up with the process. It's somebody who has some creative mindset, or who is very focused on options, on possibilities. They're the ones that create the processes. They're not the ones that follow them, but they're the ones that create them.
Yes.
Because people who are highly focused on process are not usually able to create a process in the first place.
That's really interesting.
I've sent you off on a whole new line of thought now, haven't I?
You have. That's exactly the point, though, isn't it? This is why this is such a good show, because I say that, if I say that myself, because it's not meant to have the answers. It's not, and it doesn't. Do you know what you've just made me think of? There's another thing that's happening, and it's happened for years. In the 1980s, 70s and 80s, mainly the 80s, not all, a significant amount of the new thinking, the new processes, the new ideas was people in their garages or in their studies together thinking about technology. So that was where Apple and where Microsoft and where all these other companies started. Now they've become big monolithic monsters, and that's another conversation. But you know who's in the garages now? It's the biologists that are in the garages now. It's the philosophers that are in the garages now. It's the people like you, Tina, who are in the garages now, who are saying, well, what if we were brave enough to do it this way? And I think that I see hope in that, folks. I mean, I think that's a hopeful situation. And I'm not making that up. That's true. That is, I mean, if you look at all the emergent technologies, that's where they're in, those spaces. Very little of them are in, but there's still obviously technology people in those garages, but a lot of it has changed. There was a thing, Paul, I don't know if you saw it, the New Scientist every year publish the most in-demand scientific skills in the world. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I'm aware of it. I've not seen it, no.
Yeah, and for the last 30 years, you know, when I was a bloody biologist graduate, biology was bottom of the list. Last year, for the first time, it's top of the list.
Because people are willing to embrace biophilia, biomimicry,
Exactly.
mycology,
Yeah.
all those kind of technologies that you know, Descartes put the mockers on,
Yeah.
Francis Bacon put the mockers on, the Vatican put the mockers on years and years, centuries ago.
Yes.
And it was, you know, it wasn't until it's almost like we're almost on the brink of being willing to enter into a new renaissance where we are willing to entertain ideas. You know, tree hugging isn't for hippies. There are some real health benefits to doing that, and it's proven through Japanese psychology and studies. You know, there's we know that brainwaves of humans synchronize in teams.
Yes.
We're building a body of evidence. We're showing through quantum physics that the ideas of hermetic philosophy are not as weird and strange as they were. They knew what was going on. They just couldn't show it. And unfortunately, we had this you know, the science community, for all its benefits, you know, in some quarters suppressed all of this exploration and creativity, whilst being creative in creating some of the benefits that we now benefit from.
There's a lot of paradoxes there.
Yeah.
Well, look, we're 50 minutes in, Tina, and I'd like to ask you the sort of second last question, if you like. And this can take us anywhere you like. But what's your favourite story?
Well, I could go into all sorts of fairy tales.
Yeah.
However, I'm going to tell you a story of something interesting, because Paul, it was just something that Paul said about team coaching and synchronization of brainwaves that made me think of this, and I'd kind of forgotten about it. But some years ago, I was working with a friend, and we were doing kind of market research, but it was a particular kind of style of market research. We were and we were doing this particular project was for a shoe company. I don't even know if they still exist, actually, but they wanted to kind of create a PR story around the psychology of women and shoes. Now, at the time, I was doing something equestrian, and was working with looking at the synchronization between the heart rate of the horse and the rider. Now, I haven't got very far with this idea, but I have got a heart rate monitor. So I said said to my colleague, why don't we put heart rate monitors on when we're doing the research with women around shoes? Why don't we put heart rate monitors on them and see what happens? So we did. And it was very, very interesting because, not surprisingly, when we exposed said women to shoes that were really attractive and that they really liked, their heart rate went up. And when they were exposed to shoes that were a bit frumpy and not very attractive, their heart rate didn't move from their norm. Obviously, we sort of did a norm to find out where the heart rate was to start with. But what was really interesting, was when you got the group of women in the focus group together talking about the shoes that they loved, their heart rates synchronized. How cool was that?
That's really interesting. Gosh.
We didn't test their brainwaves to see if their brainwaves synchronized as well, but it was very noticeable when we were looking at the graphs afterwards. And we hadn't been searching for that. Yeah. We didn't know that was going to happen.
Yes.
But there you are, you see, a bit of creativity, a bit of experimentation. Who knew what was actually going to come out the other end of that? You know, it could have shown nothing at all.
Yes.
But what we discovered was you get a bunch of women in a room talking about something that they have in common and enjoy, and their heart rates will synchronize.
What do you think of that, Paul?
Well, I'm a fan of the HeartMath Institute and the use of heart rate variance as a measure of group cohesion. And I've been digging some stuff out for team coaching over the last couple of days for a talk I'm doing, which is all about unity and harmony. And it's trying to show that the science exists that says, you know, we do synchronize. The whole becomes more than just the sum of the parts.
Yes.
I found out something really, really mad, which was the breaking point of iron is something like 50,000 pounds per square inch.
Right.
But if you've got stainless steel, you would think that the additional components of chromium, and I've forgotten what the other part, I think it creates a breaking point mathematically of something like 120,000 pounds per square inch.
Yeah.
But actually, the real breaking point of steel is closer to 200,000 pounds per square inch. And I find that fascinating as to why that is. I don't know why, but it just reminded me of that whole synchronization of people. So we're better together than apart.
Yes.
Which again is a whole different topic. But
it is. But no. But again, both of you, one of the things that it's a bit like the Angostura bitters and a long vodka. You know, it's like if you get a team, and I hear this a lot, particularly sports people talk about this, and most of the time they just talk complete bollocks.
Surely
but people buy it, you know. But there is a time, rare, and it's really rare, and because of that, it's precious, and because of that, it's quite beautiful. I think there's been twice in my whole career, so in 30 years of working in team environments and different companies all over the world, I've encountered what is in the literature misnamed, but it is actually the reality. It's the right word, but just they mislabel it, high performing teams.
Yeah.
Because the thing about a high performing team, in my experience, is you can't put your finger on it.
No.
It just happens, and it's almost like the only way I can identify those high performing teams I've been in is with hindsight. Because even in the moment, it works.
You can see it on stage. You can see it on stage with musicians. I've witnessed concerts where I remember seeing Oscar Peterson before he died at Bridgewater Hall with one of my good friends. Last number, and Oscar Peterson's an amazing pianist, but he's towards the end of his life. He's 80, but still rocking away.
Yeah.
And him and his trio, and it was the last number, and it was about 2 minutes in, and the whole thing just took off. To the point where me and my mate were looking at each other, jaws on the floor, going, "What's going? What are we witnessing?"
Yeah,
and it's fantastic. So I think back to Tina's story about being creativity and encouraging creativity. and taking that risk, you can lead to a better outcome very often, but it also can lead to failure. So I think if only we could encourage people to take the step out and to do that,
yes,
we'd progress. I think
yes,
as human beings, I think we'd be happier.
Yeah.
As human beings, and I think we would arrive at parts of the jigsaw that we need to build to move from where we are now to where we actually really need to be.
It's actually quite an exciting time, isn't it, guys? When you put it all this conversation together, I don't think we're in an echo chamber here. I suspect there are an awful lot of people thinking like us at the moment. You know, what do we do? You know, what do we do
I think
next?
so. I think for every bad news story that you read in the press or you see on the news or somewhere or on a social media feed, I think there's at least 100 or more good stories of stuff that people are doing to try and make a difference. And I wish we didn't have the negative bias that led us to sort of focus on the negative stuff, but more to focus on, the good stuff that people are really trying to do and are making progress.
Tina, what do you think?
Well, I think fear of failure is a massive topic, and one which obviously we can't do now because we've only got a couple of minutes left. But I think it's something actually you guys should probably have a conversation about on on another show, because just as a brief aside, I've been just this week doing a kind of free taster course with an artist called Louise Fletcher, and she has a kind of 10-week course that she's about to start, and it's called Find Your Joy, and it's all about what we started out the conversation on earlier, about finding that joyful expression of yourself as an artist. And just listening to the Q&As over the last week, constantly what has come up time and time again is the question, but what if I can't find my joy? What if I can't get it right? What if it's all about what if I fail? Ultimately, that whole question, what if I fail? And Louise's answer has always been fantastic. There is no failure. It's an experiment. You're finding something, you're discovering something. You're discovering what you like. You're discovering what you don't like. You're discovering what brings you joy and what doesn't. And if you have to go through, several weeks of finding things you don't like or that didn't bring you joy, that's great, because then you're just getting rid of those and you're getting close to the thing that does. We are so desperate not to fail from the start point that we don't actually give ourselves the time to ever go and try to see where our joy actually is.
I think, Tina, that is a beautiful way to bring the show to an end. That has been a lovely conversation. And you've definitely made me think. And as you said, you set us off in different directions. Paul, we've got some work to do.
You bet.
Can you let us know how people could get in touch with you if they're clearly going to be interested in you? This has been brilliant. So how can I've got your website here, Tina. Is there anybody else people can see your work or read about? I know you've got 3 books on horses, haven't you? And another one as well. I think you've got 4 books. Is that right? Is there more than that now?
I've got, the 3 little books of horsey humour are the main ones. There are other books that I've published and bits and bobs that I'm working on. But so they get me through that website. They can also get me through Instagram, which is at Tina B Beloved.
Ah, nice.
And I also have another website where you can find most of my photography and some of my art, which is belovedartandimagery.com.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for being a guest on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you, and I hope we get a chance to meet the 3 of us together sometime and have a coffee and a chat. If we start on the wine, we could be there all night, I suspect, guys.
Well,
I think there's a fair chance of that, but no music, right?
Aye, that might make things go wrong, Paul. We start listening to Tool. I bet Tina loves Tool. I can just imagine.
She does not.
Yeah. So thanks, Tina. That's been
No.
a privilege to have you on the show. Thanks very much.
It's been a
for being
blast.
on.
I've loved it.
Thank you. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Paul. Well, that lived up to expectations.
Good. Well, I'm glad. I hope it make people think.
It was a lovely discussion, and there is a lot more. Again, every show we say this. There's so much more to unpack here. We're not even touching the top of the top of the iceberg here.
This is very true.
So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed watching and listening to Artifact this week. And remember the thing that I've been saying now for so it's nearly 2 years now, Paul. This has been going on. Is that every day there's an opportunity to spot a story like the ones that Tina, Paul, and I just had a chat about, and they have the power to change the world. So thanks for tuning in to Artifact Live. We have got some crackers coming up, haven't we? There's some really good stuff coming up. So
yep. Yeah, looking forward to sharing it with you.
Yeah. My name's Scott MacArthur.
And I'm Paul Crick.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.